Sorry, it doesn't happen that way. In any event, about the time that I started doing that, I also ran into an old friend of mine who had a very successful wine import company. And he said, I've got a great idea, Bruce. You're going to start your own winery. You'll be traveling to New York to sell your wine, right? Right? I'm here, right? You're going to travel to New York to sell your wine. Why don't you sell my wine when you're there? We'll set up a separate business, headquartered in the Napa Valley near your home, and we'll split the profits. And I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So for the last 20 years, or almost 20, what is this? This is 2010, right? That was 1991. So I didn't miss it by much, 19 years, right? It's hard to do that subtraction when you have to borrow. It's never been my strong suit. In any event, the last 19 years of my life have been divided more or less between my home ranch, winery, and office, and vineyard in the Napa Valley in California, and France. And that's basically what I do. I sell wine from California and France all over the United States. I grow grapes in the Napa Valley, make wine there with the help of a lot of really good people. And then with the help of a lot of other really good people, many of whom are in this room right now, we sell all that wine. Successfully, I'd like to say, too. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. Sorry. So, you have before you the fruits of a project, really, that kind of was germinated in 1971 when I helped to harvest these grapes at this little winery in the Napa Valley. Looked at my wife when we sat down in the middle of the vineyard and had some really cold beer. There's a saying we have in the Napa Valley, it takes a lot of cold beer to make a little bit of wine. I promise you, at the end of a 14-hour day of dealing with grapes, the last thing in the world you want is a glass of wine. First thing you want is a really cold beer. Anyway, that project was germinated then in 1971. It involves my wife and me. We have 3 children, although our children came to us rather late in life, and they're all in college right now, so drink up. I've got 3 tuitions to cover this afternoon. For whatever combination of wonderful reasons, about 4 years ago, I got a phone call from someone involved with the Ruby Tuesday headquarters in Knoxville, Tennessee, or close to Knoxville, a suburb of Knoxville, I guess. They said, we tasted your Merlot at a board of directors meeting that we had recently, and we really liked it. We're going to be doing an upgrade, I guess. That's my word, not his. An upgrade of the wine program. Would you be interested in having your wine featured as one of the wines on our list? And I said, of course, I'm a salesman. I'm interested in almost anything. But tell me what's involved. And they told me, and I said, that just sounds way too easy. First of all, there's not a lot of Ruby Tuesdays in California, but then as we've already determined, I don't spend a lot of time in California anyway. I was familiar with the restaurants, had eaten in a number of them. I liked the idea. I was more familiar with the Blackberry Farm project that's connected to the Ruby Tuesday organization, and I jumped at the opportunity. About a month ago, I got a phone call from the gentleman who's been my primary liaison, and he said that the woman who was the operations officer, I guess, for Ruby Tuesday, Kimberly Grant, I believe her name was going to be in the Napa Valley for the first time. Would I be able to spend some time with her? And I had leapt at the opportunity, and she turned out to be not only extraordinarily charming, but very interested. A lot of that interest was predicated on the fact that the vineyard where we grow our Merlot, which also is the piece of land where my home is located, has been farmed organically and sustainably. Keep those 2 words because they're separate. They don't necessarily connect to one another. They tend to be involved a lot, though. We farm organically and sustainably, and have farmed organically and sustainably since 1999. And in 2009, we were finally certified by an organization called the California Certified Organic Farmers Organization. So we now are certified. We have the credentials that we are allowed to start putting on the label, beginning with the 2010 harvest as organic farmers. Well, so now you know all there is to know about me. Maybe we should turn our attention to the wine, okay? The University of California at Davis is thought to be one of the world's great educational institutions. I think it is because of the fact that they've got one of the world's single most consequential schools of winemaking. The science of winemaking is called enology. The science of grape growing is called viticulture. You can go to the University of California at Davis and study those two disciplines in a 4-year program that leads to a Bachelor of Science degree in either enology or the farming part of it, viticulture. And believe it or not, they have a course in wine tasting. It's one of the most popular courses at the university. I've never really understood that one. And I've attended that course several times over the years. I like to go back for refresher courses. It seems like every time I go there I learn something new. And they teach you that there are 3 things to keep in mind when you taste wine. The first is the appearance of the wine. Is a red wine dark enough? Is a rosé pink enough? Is a Chardonnay pale lime or pale green enough? So that's the first thing you want to look for, is the appearance. Does the appearance seem to be correct? Merlot is a red wine. It's made from a red grape. This looks pretty red to me. So we passed that test, right? Then the second thing you do is you swirl it. And when you swirl it, what happens is a little bit of the wine is deposited on the inside of the glass. Just a very thin layer, and although it looks like it's dropping back into the liquid at the bottom of the glass, some of it is actually vaporizing. And as it vaporizes, becomes a gas essentially, you can smell it better. And that's why we stick our noses in it. I have this wonderful, wonderful French friend I've known for, gosh, almost 40 years, I bet. He moved to California, lived with my wife and me in 1975 when he was 17 years old and just graduated from high school in the Burgundy region of France. I now import the wine that he makes and sell it all over the U.S. Imagine how that continuum makes me feel pleased. The thing that I've always marveled at is he has this wonderful nose. He's a tall, very slender gentleman, but he's got this wonderful nose, and when he puts his nose in a glass of wine, boy, he smells it all. His name is Jean-Marc Rouleau, and I keep thinking, if I really behave myself and come back in the afterlife, I'll come back with a nose like his. So you want to smell it. And what do you smell in a wine? I don't know, help me out here. Anybody care to volunteer what they smell? How about grapes?
Yes.
Well, we're lucky. We found a wine made from grapes. You can actually make wine from a lot of other things, including dandelions. All you need is some natural sugar, or the ability to convert a carbohydrate that's in that medium into some form of sugar, and then it can ferment to form the ethyl alcohol that makes it an alcoholic beverage. But we like to think of wine as being the substance that's made from grapes. Okay? So you smell grapes. There's a fascinating study that was done at this University of California, Davis. It was, I'll make up the dates because I forget, but I think it was like 1985 to 88. And one of their really sophisticated biochemists did a 3-year study with a couple of graduate students, and they took sample after sample after sample after sample, hundreds and hundreds of samples of wines from all over the world, old and new, expensive, inexpensive, very simple wines, very complicated wines, and they opened them and subjected them to what's called gas-liquid chromatography. It's a very sophisticated piece of equipment that can measure tiny, tiny amounts of chemicals that are in wine. They found out that every wine that they analyzed had about 80% water. Every wine that they analyzed had about 12 to 14% alcohol. Every wine is 80% water, every wine is 14% alcohol, let's say. That's 94% of every wine is water and alcohol. It's that 6%, that little bitty 6% that makes the difference between 1929 Chateau Latour that a recent auction in New York sold for $150,000 a bottle, and a bottle of Gallo Hardy Burgundy that you can get across the street here for, what, $2.19. 6% is the difference. Now, I find that personally pretty phenomenal. I think that's a fantastic piece of information. 6% is the difference between $1 a bottle and $100,000 a bottle. So what you're trying to smell here is that 6%. Okay? They found that in their samples that they analyzed, in some instances they could find in excess of 10,000 different chemicals available in trace amounts in an open bottle of wine. That 6% had 10,000 different measurable compounds. Sometimes you smell them right away. Sometimes you smell them an hour after you open the bottle. Sometimes you smell them after the wine is aged for 15, 20 years. It's this wonderful living beverage that has this extraordinary ability to be complicated. And that's why we make such a fuss about it. All right? In the final analysis, basically you're going to sit down and drink it. And whether you drink it with Chateaubriand or a burger doesn't really matter. The trick is that the wine be pleasurable. And that's what it's all about. The late, great Benjamin Franklin had a wonderful quote that's been part of his lore for forever. And Benjamin Franklin wrote that wine is proof that God loves us and wants to see us happy. How prescient. 1776 he said that. Anyway, the third part of the three-part analysis is the taste. Okay? Swirl it around a little bit. We've examined the color. You've smelled it. It smells like grapes. There'll be some other things that you'll probably not want to say, but the smells are there. Now taste it. One of the other things they teach you at UC Davis in this tasting class is to actually close your mouth and gulp in some air. That ensures that the wine gets swished around inside the entirety of your mouth. I think you have something like 110 different taste receptors in your mouth. Most of them are on your tongue, but some of them are on the sides of your mouth as well. And you don't taste them unless the wine hits them. If the wine just goes straight through, you miss a lot of those taste receptors. So sometimes you'll see people take a sip of wine and go as they slurp in some air. Believe me, they're not having any kind of a problem. There's no need for the medical technicians to be summoned. Basically what they're trying to do is to get more of the taste of the mouth, the wine in their mouth. Okay? Now I submit there's a fourth part to the tasting cycle, and that's the aftertaste. And I submit this because this young fellow who I mentioned who has the wonderful nose, Jean-Marc Rouleau, when he was 17 years old and spent the summer living with my wife and me, he remarked that as part of his class in wine tasting in France, he was taught to swallow a wine and then count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, for as long as the taste of that wine stayed in his mouth. And if a wine stayed in your mouth, if the flavor could be identified for 5 seconds or more, you were tasting a great wine. Okay, so I want everybody to do this. Swirl a little of this around, put it in your mouth, now slurp it some to aerate it, swallow it, and then count. How long does this aftertaste stay in your mouth?